Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to take this super bulky 100% wool yarn and we are going to over dye it. Now this yarn is a mint green and I likely picked it up on some kind of clearance. And so sometimes you can get a pastel color and then really transform it because even if we go pink, which we're going to be going pink today, we should be able to cover up just about all of this mint color to transform the yarn. And really it's funny how mint is a color that I go for a lot. This jumbo weight yarn has only 44 yards per 200 grams. And yeah, it's just 100% wool. I have dyed Tuff Puff before. It has very low twist. I wouldn't quite call it pencil roving because it does have some twist to it, but it's a thick yarn. I mean, for reference, here's a pencil, just like a number 2 pencil. And so, yeah, the yarn is like thick. But the thing I really want to show today is that, again, you do not need to start off with bare undyed yarn. Sometimes you start home dyeing because you have yarn in your stash that you don't want to use and you want to transform it into something else. And I've over dyed a lot of different yarn. I think I have a whole playlist on that, but today we're gonna use this mint colored yarn. If you want to learn more about the Knit Picks bare yarn, I don't know if Super Tuff Puff still exists or if there's just the slightly thinner version Tuff Puff, but I will have Knit Picks affiliate links down in the video description, and so I might earn a commission if you make purchases through my links. Over at my sink, you can see that the yarn does still have at least one tie on it, which is good, and that might be the only tie. So I am gonna just put on a removable nylon zip tie. I might recommend that you add some of your own butterfly ties, but we're not gonna do that today. Now this yarn, you can see, is gonna be grippy. You can see even without dyeing it, the strands are sort of connecting a little bit and it's gripping to itself. And so yes, this could be sort of felting-esque, but I just am showing this because I want you to anticipate when you eventually wind it into a cake, you will need to pull the strands apart. And that's before we've even started dyeing. Since our goal is to actually try to cover up a lot of the mint, even though with the pink colors I am planning on using today, if some of the mint shows through, that'll be okay. But I think where color might show through is near the center of some of these strands. And so it is gonna take a while for us to pre-soak this yarn. Now, if you want to make sure you get really good coverage, you might want to have some soap in the pre-soak to remove some oils. This is not a step I typically do myself, so that might not be something that you need to do. Look at me uncarefully treating this yarn. Today I'm going to do a cold process technique because that's what works the most for me, but I'm also going to, for now, we're going to fill up the basin with cool water. And we're gonna let this yarn sit for at least a couple of hours. And that's because I want to give enough time so we can get as much water into our yarn as possible. You could do overnight, and periodically I will come and press. I'm trying to not rub it, but you can see that this air is coming out, and so that means that that part of the yarn is not super wet. And so I might do that periodically, but then we'll pop back in after a couple of hours. Editing Rebecca, just popping in to say that the 2023 ChemKnits Chanukah Samplers are ready to ship. Chanukah starts December 7th, so there's plenty of time for you to order yours. So that way, each night of Chanukah, you can unwrap a different 10-gram mini skein of yarn while watching a YouTube video of me dyeing that yarn. The whole thing's a lot of fun, and there's lots of other goodies in the samplers as well. You can find more information in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, and I'll have links down in the video description. For our dyes today, we're going to be using 4 different pink colors from Derma Acid dyes. And I hesitated a little bit with pink because Berry Crush starts to lean a little bit purple. It is a little bit more blue, and Cabernet is more of a burgundy kind of color. But in addition to those two, we have Deep Magenta and Fluorescent Fuchsia. Now, earlier today, I measured out, and by measuring, I took a little bit of the dye powder dissolved it in water. And I've already used a lot of these colors on a couple other projects. But I will say that I have less than half a gram of the fluorescent fuchsia here. The Cabernet, just a tiny amount. And I think I'd probably use at least, did I use the deep magenta magenta? Maybe I have about half a gram of the deep magenta and then a quarter or something of the berry crush. These are all extremely rough estimates, but I would say I have definitely less than 2 grams of dye here total. And so when we go and apply these to our yarn, we should be able to get some really nice coverage. At least that is my hope. All right, the yarn has been pre-soaking since this morning, and there are still some air bubbles. It occurred to me like just now as I'm about to start dyeing this that this could have been an opportunity for me to scour the yarn. So for me to wash it with soap to help remove oils that are there from the milling process, from my hands. And I'm not gonna do that. We'll see if I end up regretting it. All right, but now I wanna remove our minty yarn from the pre-soak. We have no acid in here yet, and I'm gonna add it to my shoebox. There's still a little bit of liquid in here. I don't wanna felt things, but we will add some water. And my thought is that we'll start with the fluorescent fuchsia because hopefully we'll be able to get that all over the yarn. Rather than using the pre-soak water, I'm gonna get some fresh water just because that's a little cloudy. I'm coming over with the water. And yes, I am recording. That is always good. And I want to fill this with enough water. Go to about there. Now, the good news is that fluorescent fuchsia is a color that spreads out a lot. And I know I didn't use much of this color today yet, so I'm taking it and I'm attempting to cover the mint. And you can see right now, we have, actually it's looking very nice and pink, which is good. It's like very rosy. I don't know if we're gonna have any mint left behind. I am hoping and optimistic that this is gonna work the way that I wanted. And then we'll be able to layer the other colors on. But I will say, at some of the edges, I do still see some hints of the mint color. And so I don't know if we're gonna cover it up 100%, but also I kind of don't mind. So we'll see. But I'm gonna let this sit for like 5 minutes before we add some acid, just so that way the dye can soak through. Now I'm gonna add some acid. So let's do, you can see the mint, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar, and oh my gosh, you can really see how little of the color has struck. Because again, this is non-superwash wool, and not only is it non-superwash, oh goody. Okay, let's sort of like scooch this down. Not only is it non-superwash, but, oh yeah, and lifting it up just like showed all that mint. But we have a color here that takes a while to strike. And so, yeah, I have a feeling it might take a little while for this to clear. But that's okay. All right, let's add, this is just me rinsing that out. It's so funny. Seeing the mint, but you know what? It's already more like grayish. Is green the opposite end of pink? Kind of. I mean, red is. Pink might be a little closer to purple. I don't know. I think I want the Cabernet to be towards the middle. So I'm gonna take this color, pour it on, and sort of work it through a little bit, knowing that it may not be going all the way to the bottom. Now, it looks very brown. Don't be alarmed. Cabernet can look very, very brown until it strikes. Okay, this is some deep magenta. I have no idea if everything is just gonna blend together, and as I'm like working it through, there's definitely areas at the bottom that don't have the color, which could make things a little bit less symmetrical, but given that like there's so little yardage, I think we'll be okay. And I think this is Berry Crush, which is way more purpley than those other colors. Like it's got more blue to it. And so that's just pretty. But what doing the fluorescent fuchsia, yeah, the fluorescent fuchsia first allowed me to do was, as I was adding these other colors, we knew we had something all over. And so if things don't all combine completely, which they might, we have a chance of having some reasonable coverage here versus just something super surface level. But ooh, on camera you can see the differences. That's great. All of the pinks I'm working with today were picked because they were different from one another. But I'm gonna go clean up a little bit. I'm hesitant to move this because I know that when I move it, it's gonna move the colors around a little bit. And I'm nervous about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Yeah, because I just have a feeling once I move it, I'm not going to be able to pick it up and have it. Yeah, I mean, I want to bring it outside, even though it is October and it gets a little bit chilly at night. It's not freezing yet, and the days have been super warm lately. So I think it would be okay. But it does have a very forbidden spaghetti vibe going on right now. Let me get a lid for it. The top of this all looks as it did when I first poured it. I will say from the sides, I don't see a ton of differentiation of color, but I think it's a little hard to say what's happening beneath the surface. So it may end up just feeling like a tonal pink with some mint hints, or maybe it'll feel different. But I suppose I have a tiny bit of vinegar left in here. May as well add it. And I'm gonna try to keep this as level as possible as I move it outside for at least overnight and maybe a couple days. Okay, outside on my patio, and I carried it out here, and things look combined. I mean, I see a hint of different color here. Maybe that's a bit more blue, but a lot of what felt different that I saw inside, no, you know what? I see more blue there and more bright pink here. But yeah, things moved around a lot while I walked out here. So we'll see. We'll see if there's any differences. I know these pinks all look different. So we'll see if it feels like one thing or not. It has been a couple of days and the lid here is quite dirty. I will need to wash that. But I also want to grab some gloves. You know, I do feel like I see a darker pink here and a brighter pink over there, but I'm unsure how much variation we will have. Now, there's still a little bit of pink left here in the dye bath, but I think we're gonna let that go. Most of the color is in our yarn, and I think with it wet, it's gonna be hard to tell what kind of variation we have. So I'm gonna immediately pop this yarn into a steamer basket. And so I'm gonna go and steam set this for at least 30 minutes. But just to show, we definitely do still have some color in here, but it's not that much pigment. You know, I think I do see variation, but again, it's hard because when the yarn dries out a little bit, then you see less pigment and the areas that have more water look darker. We'll have to reserve judgment. But anyway, I'm gonna go steam set this on the stovetop for 30 minutes at least, and there's some water at the bottom of the pot, so I'm not worried about things drying out. I just started heating it up, so we're not really steamy yet. But will this yarn and will this color bleed once we wash it? It's hard to say because there was pink left in the dye bath, so we might see some bleeding there. But also, I haven't applied heat yet. Now, if this yarn were superwash, I would have expected to see less pink remaining, but potentially a little bit of pink in the water. But since this is not superwash, having a little bit more pink, which is a color that does take a lot longer to absorb, needs more heat than some other pigments, it's not super concerning, but yeah, we'll have to see. And You can see we're starting to get a little bit of steam. But anyway, I'm gonna set the timer and we'll see you in a little bit. The 30 minutes are up and I am curious. I'm gonna turn off the heat. We're gonna take a paper towel. So I'm not seeing color transfer. Actually, maybe I have a hint of some pink there, but not very much. It's very minor. So that's good, but I'm gonna leave the yarn in here to cool off for a little bit. I'm gonna remove the steamer basket from the heat, and yeah, we're going to just be patient, let it cool completely to room temperature before we wash it. At some point, I may remove it from the basket, especially if I need to steam set other things today. But for now, there's no harm with it getting a little bit of an additional heat. Okay, we have our pink yarn, and I went and took it out, and it's still very steamy. I was gonna put it in to wash it, and I'm like, oh, no. Because the top of it was cool to touch, but as soon as I lift it up, see that steam? That just means we need to let it sit and cool some more. Now that we're actually cool, let's wash our pink yarn. And oh, I am crossing my fingers. I'm also curious, we'll do this more once it's dry, to see if we see any hints of that mint. All right, I'm seeing a little bit of some bleeding. And I need to remind myself, we need to be very careful. We don't want to felt our yarn. Now, this is less pink than we had when we originally removed the yarn from the dye bath. So that's good. I just added a little bit of some dish soap. And I am gonna just soak our yarn in here for, I don't know, 10 minutes maybe. But first I'll fill up the basin and then we're just gonna let it soak. All right, it has been about 10 minutes. We're seeing a little bit more bleeding, but we added soap, so therefore that's not completely unexpected. Now what we hope now is once we start rinsing out the yarn that we get less and less and less bleeding. That's what we're hoping for. So I'm filling up the basin again. Okay, and let's see. Well, look at that. We're looking quite clear. Yeah, I'm not seeing any more pink. And so I'm not gonna press my luck. I'm gonna go put this through my spin dryer. And now that we're out of the spin dryer, I'm gonna go hang it up to dry. And we definitely have some tonal variation in here. I'm super excited. And yeah, we'll take a closer look at it soon. Here is the dry yarn. And we absolutely have tonal variation. We have areas that are more blue, a little bit less blue, and there's depth of shade differences within the sections. I'm not sure if I exactly feel 3 different pinks, but actually, now that I'm trying, if I rotate it, I think I do. 1, 2, and then that one is bluer. This is deeper. Did I use Cabernet in the middle? I honestly don't remember. But I feel the differences. It's very, very subtle. But for a super chunky yarn like this, where you'll probably make a hat or a cowl, having those differences be really subtle will be really nice. And still, if you do any kind of cable or moss stitch or texture, it's going to give it even more dimension and be really lovely. As for the fibers themselves, there is some slight surface felting. I'm not sure if you can see when I separate it, that there are strands here in the middle that sort of connect the yarn, but it would be super easy to wind into a ball. Let's see if over here is a little more clumped. You can see how when I separate it, I'm pulling the strands apart, but you can still sort of open up and look into the interior of the strands. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call this, ooh, super felted. Now, as for the mint, I'm not seeing any. And if I take a look at some of the lighter patches and look towards the center, the pink went all the way through. And I think it's because it took that pink so long to strike. The only place where we can probably find the mint is here around the tie, and even there it looks a little bit more gray, a little bit more toned. I think if I were to play with this knot a little bit, so the color went through, but you can feel some of those mint notes here. But that's because we had the resist of that knot. So then as for the rest of our yarn, I mean, we have a really successful overdyeing project. You know, looking at it, after just looking at the knot, I do almost feel in some areas some influence of the mint, maybe, but it's hard to say for sure. I mean, ultimately, even though the mint is a beautiful, it's not even quite a pastel, it is paler, but it's pastel to medium because it's a bright pastel. Even though we had that, you can take it in an opposite direction and still have something that feels like a bright, vibrant berry. I mean, this is a little more jewel tone versus like super bright, but we went in a completely different direction. And so you could take a similar pink that is a similar color, like depth of shade, and then overdye that with a green or do something in another direction. And so my point here, whenever I do a video quite like this, is that if you want to dye your own yarn and you're on a budget, you can go into your stash and dye some remnants, overdye some remnants, as long as the color isn't that saturated. And similarly, when you're shopping for bare yarn, if you're shopping at Knit Picks, and again, I have affiliate links to Knit Picks down in the video description, but if you're shopping at Knit Picks and there's a yarn base you like, but maybe you want the bare yarn to be on sale and it's not, check the sale rack and look for other pastels because you might just find what you're looking for. I'm actually really sad that Super Tuff Puff is no longer available. I've knit many things out of Tuff Puff itself, and while there are probably some single ply yarn bases that are a little bit softer, this is a more sort of hardy yarn. It isn't unsoft, but it's not as soft as say a merino would have been. I'm bummed that this isn't like available to dye more. The regular Tuff Puff I think is. I probably have this in a very deep purple shade, but the problem with a solid is sometimes it feels very flat. And so maybe I do need to take that and add something to it to give it a little bit of dimension. And so add like a tiny bit of say navy or a pink to just bring a little bit more depth to it. If that is something you would be interested in, please let me know in the comments down below. If I should try going into my stash. I don't know for sure that I have that deep purple still, but I think I might. So if you want me to travel deep into my own personal stash to find things to overdye, yeah, let me know down in the comments below. And while you're at it, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. This is the biggest way you can help support the content here. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.